Alright, so there's another article out on Seeking Alpha claiming that Palantir is overvalued and potentially even uninvestable. So let's take a look and break down some of the claims and see if they're actually true or if it's just total BS. So the main claim here is that Palantir's biggest threat is the reputational risk that comes with the territory of the business that they're in. Essentially that people think Palantir collects people's personal data or that they're working with evil clients like the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Unit in the US. And the article says that the more that Palantir grows, the more that it's going to attract public scrutiny. So what's my take? Well, honestly, I think some of these are valid points, but they might be overblown a little. So let's break it down. First of all, I do agree with the author that public opinion or reputational risk is one of the greatest threats to Palantir. And that's especially true since most people in the general public or even in the investing space don't seem to understand fully what Palantir is or what its software products actually do. To the general public, Palantir might just be an evil-sounding, privacy-invading corporation. And of course, that's definitely a risk because Palantir has to work very hard to make the general public and lawmakers and basically any potential clients understand what they do, what they offer, and why it's not unethical to work with them. Luckily, however, Palantir is taking big steps to address this issue, and that's why I think the whole premise of the article might be a little bit overblown. For starters, Alex Karp, the CEO of the company, has been doing an incredible amount of interviews, especially since the beginning of January. He did the earnings call and he's done maybe 5+ other interviews that are posted publicly for people to see, where he digs into some of these thorny issues. And that type of openness and transparency, I think, goes a long way to combat this type of risk. In fact, in general, Palantir has been doing a lot of positive PR stuff this year. They launched a YouTube channel for developers. They made a partnership with a YouTuber, CodeStrap, to actually share what Palantir Foundry actually does, which is super cool. They've been doing all these info sessions on LinkedIn, and they even set up a blog and a Twitter account that's specifically dedicated to explaining to people what Palantir does and why it's actually helping to support the values that our societies actually have. In addition to all of that, they're doing a lot more marketing and advertising, and they've hired a lot of new salespeople, which will be spreading the positive word about Palantir and conveying to potential clients and the general public that it's actually a value-added product, not something that people need to be afraid of. And finally, of course, Palantir does have a lot of safeguards built into the code of Palantir Foundry or Palantir Gotham that are meant to protect people from accessing data or information that they shouldn't have and to protect people's privacy. Now, of course, as with any system like this, there are potential points of failure or risks. And so, for example, with Palantir, there were reports last year, I think it was last summer, of a glitch in the software where certain members of the FBI were accessing data that they weren't supposed to have access to. It was supposed to be compartmentalized, and for some reason, they had access to it. Now, Palantir has denied reports that it was actually a software issue or a bug in the code, and in fact are claiming that the issue was user-generated on the FBI site. They weren't using the software properly. But regardless of which side of this is actually true, it's a reputational risk. It's because as soon as there's articles posted about it, whether or not it is true doesn't even really matter. People will just look at the headlines and then associate Palantir with data privacy issues, after which they're going to have to work twice as hard to convince people that they're not some sort of evil Eye of Sauron type of institution. So yes, while I do agree with the author of the article that this is definitely a risk, I think it might have been a little bit overblown, and in fact there's a couple of other issues that I have with what's said here. First of all, the author says that Palantir's stated goal is to become the operating system for the US government, which absolutely I agree, and they've definitely said that. They said that they're probably going to become the first software prime. However, what I completely disagree with is when the author says that this is fully incorporated into the price of the stock today. The possibility of Palantir becoming generally accepted as the operating system of the US government. And I absolutely do not agree that that is the case. The company is doing a great job of securing US government clients. And if you look at the list and the types of institutions or organizations that are on it, it's definitely a huge plus, but they're still barely just scratching the surface, and there's a lot of room to grow before we could say that they've become the de facto operating system for the entire US government. And so I think for the author to suggest that this is completely priced in is a little bit ridiculous, because the total government revenue, even just from the US, would be significantly higher than it is today if that came to pass. And the current valuation of Palantir on a price to sales basis is not exactly extravagant. So no, I don't think that possibility is fully priced in. And the last point of this article that I fundamentally disagree with is the fact that he's suggesting that Palantir's growth is going to slow down over the next 5 years. And if we look at the data, if we look at the most recent earnings report from Q4 or even Q3, Q2 of last year, we are seeing the exact opposite. We are not seeing a decline in Palantir's revenue growth rate. We are seeing an acceleration, especially on the commercial side. Client counts are going through the roof. Palantir is investing heavily in its sales force and is deploying them all around the world in completely new markets and completely new industries. And I fully expect that this is going to continue to accelerate and, if anything, to snowball. Because when it comes down to it, if Palantir can show a business or a government that it can 10x its productivity and its efficiency by adopting Palantir Foundry or Palantir Gotham, then really, I don't think anything else matters in that decision. Reputational risk is definitely something to watch and keep an eye on, but in my opinion, it absolutely does not make Palantir uninvestable. Not by a long shot.